My parents kicked me out when I chose not to become a doctor like my older brother. They said I was throwing my life away, so I built my own success from the ground up. Years later, after watching my brother fail miserably, they came crawling back, begging for my help. I told them no. Growing up, I always knew I was different. My family, especially my parents, had a very clear idea of how life should go. You were either going to follow in the footsteps of the golden child, or you were going to be forgotten. That golden child, of course, was my older brother. He was the perfect one. The one who could do no wrong. He had always been the center of attention. I remember being a kid, sitting at the dinner table, listening to my parents rave about his grades, his achievements, his future. "He's going to be a doctor," they'd say, with pride that could barely fit in the room. Meanwhile, I sat there, not being bad but not being perfect either. It was like I was invisible unless they needed someone to compare to my brother's brilliance. The pressure from my parents was suffocating. It wasn't just about being good at school or sports, it was about being great. And my brother was the only one who seemed capable of that. He never seemed to struggle, and that made him the hero in their eyes. I don't think they even noticed the way I shrank into the background. It didn't matter that I had my own interests or dreams. I was just secondary. The love I got from my parents always felt like an afterthought, a mere fraction of what they poured onto my brother. There were times when I tried to speak up about my own passions or the things I enjoyed, but it was always met with polite silence or a quick subject change. The truth was, they didn't care about me the same way they cared about him. He was going to be a doctor, and I was just supposed to follow suit. This all started to build up over the years, but it all came to a head when I had to make the most important decision of my life. The one that would define the rest of my existence in my family's eyes. And let me tell you, it wasn't an easy one. But things didn't really get real until that fateful day when I stood up to them and made a choice that changed everything. That's when everything began to unravel. I remember the day so clearly, like it was yesterday. I had just graduated from high school, and the pressure to decide what I was going to do with my life had become unbearable. I knew my parents expected me to follow the same path as my brother, to go into medicine, to study for years, and to become a doctor. They've been talking about it for so long that I felt like there was no other choice. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to disappoint them by choosing anything else. But here's the thing, deep down, I never wanted to be a doctor. I didn't have the heart for it. Sure, I was good at science, but that wasn't my passion. I wanted to do something different, something creative, something that could challenge me in a way that medicine never could do so. I did it. I told my parents that I wasn't going to medical school. I remember their faces, the shock, the disbelief. They thought I was joking, but I wasn't. I was serious. I told them I wanted to go into graphic design. It was my calling. I loved art, I loved technology, and the idea of working in a field where I could merge both of those things just felt right. The room fell silent. My parents looked at each other, then back at me, almost as if they couldn't process what I had just said. They were furious. "You're throwing your life away." My dad snapped, his face red with anger. My mom, usually the calm one, didn't say a word. She just stared at me. Her disappointment so thick in the air, I could almost touch it, but it didn't stop there. No, that would have been too easy. My brother, who had been sitting quietly through this entire exchange, finally spoke up. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, his voice dripping with judgment. "You're not thinking this through. Do you really think you'll be successful with that? It's not practical, and it's not what our family expects." His words stung more than I care to admit. He wasn't just disagreeing with me. He was dismissing my dreams as if they didn't matter. He, the golden child, was now the one to lecture me about following my passion as though it was somehow less important than what he had chosen for his life. I won't lie to you. I hesitated. For a moment, I thought maybe I should just give in, follow the path they wanted for me, and be done with the constant fighting. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. I had spent my whole life being pushed aside, constantly told what to do, constantly compared to my brother. I wasn't going to let them do that to me anymore. So, I stood my ground. "I'm not changing my mind," I said, my voice firm. "I'm going to pursue what I love. And if you can't support me, then maybe I don't belong here anymore. That's when my mom spoke up, her voice trembling with emotion. If you choose that path, don't expect any help from us. You're on your own. And with that, they made it clear. I wasn't just disappointing them. I was out. I didn't stop after leaving home. I refused to. There was no turning back now, no matter how difficult it got. The first few months were tough, no question. But I didn't give up. I took on small gigs at first, designing logos for local businesses, helping with branding for startup companies, anything to keep the lights on. It wasn't glamorous, and there were days I thought I might fail, but the more I worked, the better I got. The more my name spread. Eventually, those small gigs led to bigger opportunities. I got my first big project working with a tech company, and that's when everything changed. My reputation started to grow, and the money followed. I invested in online courses to keep up with the latest trends in design. I networked tirelessly, and little by little, my freelance business turned into something real. I was able to hire a team, build a brand, and start landing clients that were way beyond anything I could have imagined when I first walked out of that house. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I had my own design firm. I was successful in ways I hadn't even thought possible. No longer scraping by with ramen noodles, I had a comfortable lifestyle, a career I loved, and clients who respected me. The validation I had always craved for my family wasn't needed anymore. I had made it on my own, and for once, I felt at peace with my choices. I had done it. I had proven that my path wasn't a mistake and that I didn't need my parents' approval to succeed. But even though I had moved on, my family hadn't forgotten about me. And one day, years later, I got a call from my mom. "How are you?" she asked, the same hesitation in her voice that I remembered from before. It was like she wasn't sure what kind of response she would get. "I'm doing well," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral, though I couldn't help but feel a little coldness in my chest. "Business is great. I'm busy." There was a long pause on the other end, and then my mom spoke again, her voice shaky. "Your brother, he's not doing so well. He's been struggling in his medical practice. His patients are leaving, and he's racked up a lot of debt. We really need your help." I felt a sharp sting in my chest when I heard those words. My brother, the golden child, the one who always had everything handed to him, was now struggling. I couldn't say I was surprised. He had always been treated like the perfect son, the one who could do no wrong, while I was left to figure things out on my own. And now, after all these years, he was failing? And my parents wanted my help? My mind raced, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, my tone colder than I intended, though I didn't really care. "But I've been working hard for years to get where I am." I didn't get any help when I was starting out. There was another long pause. I could almost hear her trying to figure out what to say next, probably realizing the gravity of what she was asking. "I know," she said softly, "but we thought that maybe, if you could help him out, he could turn things around. He's lost everything, and we don't know what else to do." "Help him? After everything they'd put me through? After they kicked me out, told me I was ruining my life for choosing my own path, and treated me like an afterthought? Now they were asking for my help." I felt the old bitterness creeping up, the memories of all those years of rejection and judgment flooding back. I had done everything on my own, everything. And here they were, asking me to step in and save my brother from the mess he had gotten himself into. I couldn't believe the audacity. "I don't think you understand," I said slowly, my voice even colder now. "I've built my own success from the ground up. I didn't get where I am by being handed everything, like he was. I had to work for every single thing I've got. And now you want me to fix his problems?" She tried to explain, but I cut her off. "I'm sorry, but that's not how this works. I'm not a safety net for anyone." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, but I knew she was still there. I could practically feel her holding her breath, waiting for me to say something different to offer help, but I wouldn't. I couldn't. Not after everything. "Goodbye, Mom," I said. My words as final as I could make them, and then I hung up. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand as I set it down. It was like a part of me that had been holding on to a shred of hope for some reconciliation had finally snapped. This wasn't about helping my brother. It was about me being used. Again, I sat there, staring at my phone for what felt like an eternity, trying to process everything. I couldn't believe I had just done that. After all those years of being pushed aside, after all the hurtful things they'd said, I had finally drawn the line. I wasn't going to be their backup plan anymore. But even with that certainty, the feeling of coldness lingered in my chest. I had built everything I had from nothing, and I wasn't about to let them just waltz back into my life when things weren't going their way. The thought of them, desperate for my help, it was almost laughable. How could they possibly expect me to just forget how they treated me? All the years of neglect, of constantly comparing me to my brother, of shoving me aside because I wasn't living the life they wanted for me. I glanced over at my computer screen, filled with ongoing projects and deadlines. My business was thriving. I had clients from all over the world, and my design firm was growing rapidly. I didn't need them. I didn't need their validation. I had proven that I could do this on my own. And yet, here they were, needing me when it suited them. It didn't sit right. The next few days felt like a blur. My phone was quiet, save for the occasional client email or project update. I kept myself busy, throwing myself into my work, trying to distract myself from the storm of emotions swirling in my mind. But I couldn't stop thinking about that call, about my brother's failure. Eventually, my mom tried reaching out again. It wasn't just one call. It became several, each one more desperate than the last. She left messages, telling me how bad things were, how my brother was falling deeper into debt, how the pressure from his failed practice was tearing their family apart. They wanted my help, but they weren't just asking for money. No, they were asking me to use my success to bail him out, to save him from his mess. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. And then, after days of relentless messages, I got a text from my mom that read, "We're sorry for everything. We need you." I paused for a moment, staring at those words, feeling a wave of disgust wash over me. It was like they were admitting their mistakes, but only because they needed something from me. And that just didn't sit right. I thought about what to say. I considered responding with something calm, something rational. Maybe I could just politely refuse and leave it at that. But instead, I felt this deep, cold resolve take over. I picked up my phone, typed out a message, and hit send. No. I stared at the word on my screen for a moment, the weight of it heavier than I expected. It wasn't just a word. It was years of frustration, years of feeling less than, years of being rejected and dismissed. The finality of it, the simplicity of the word, felt like a form of liberation. And yet, as I pressed send, I couldn't help but feel the tension in my chest, like I was letting go of something I hadn't even realized I was still holding on to. The messages didn't stop after that. My mom texted again, and then my dad called, pleading for me to reconsider. He said things like, "Your brother is at his breaking point, and he needs you. You're the only one who can help." But none of it made me budge. The same desperation, the same pleading, the same excuses, they all sounded hollow to me. I ignored their calls. The next day, I got a text from my mom. "We never wanted you to feel this way. Please, don't shut us out. We need you to help him." I didn't reply, but I knew what they were doing. They were trying to guilt-trip me, trying to manipulate me into feeling like the bad guy for not helping. Like I was supposed to come running because family always comes first, but they never cared about me first. I wasn't the one they turned to when they needed help before. I wasn't the one they praised or encouraged when I was following my own dreams. No, I was the disappointment. Now, when everything was crumbling around them, they expected me to be the hero. But I wasn't going to play that part. I was about to put my phone down and get back to work when I got a final message from my dad. It was short, direct, and cutting. "You're just like your mother, selfish and cold. I never expected this from you." That was it. That was the last straw. I wasn't going to be the scapegoat for their failures anymore. I wasn't going to be their backup when they needed me, and I wasn't going to let them twist my success into a way for them to salvage theirs. I knew I had made the right choice, but the emptiness still lingered. I didn't know if I'd ever speak to them again, and honestly, a part of me didn't care as the silence stretched on. I realized something. Maybe family wasn't always blood. Maybe it wasn't about who you were born to. It was about the people who lifted you up, who supported you when you needed it, and who respected you for who you were, not for what you could do for them. A few weeks passed, and the silence from my parents was deafening. My phone didn't buzz with texts or calls anymore. I had no idea if they had given up or if they were just waiting for me to cave. Either way, I had made my decision. I was living my life, my life. I was no longer bound by their expectations or their guilt trips. I had earned my success and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. My business continued to grow, my clients were happy and I was happier than I had ever been. Eventually, my brother's failed practice was the talk of the family. I heard through mutual contacts that he had to close it down after accruing massive debt. It wasn't a surprise to me. He had always been handed everything, never had to fight for anything. And when the going got tough, he couldn't handle it. I never reached out to offer help. And honestly, I didn't feel bad about it. In fact, I felt more at peace than ever. I had taken control of my life. No longer living in the shadow of expectations and comparisons. And even though I wasn't sure if I'd ever repair my relationship with my parents or brother, I knew I had done the right thing to ask for my family. They had their own issues to sort out. They were no longer a part of my journey, and that was okay. I had learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from those who never believed in you. You don't owe them your success. And so I moved forward on my terms. Wow. This story really makes you think. It's crazy how family can push you down, then expect you to pick them up when they need help. Up worked so hard to build their success, and after all the years of being overlooked, they were right to stand firm. I get it. Sometimes you have to put yourself first even if it means cutting ties. What do you think? Should OP have helped, or was the no the right choice? Ever had to stand up for yourself like this? Let me know in the comments.